Hey guys, it's me, Pyramid Head, once again, and today I'm giving you another review. And this time I decided to pick just a random movie that looked interesting off of Netflix Instant that Netflix had on instant streaming, and something that I hadn't seen. And this time I wanted to not be like a cheap horror movie that I just watched on there, which is usually what I do when I do this. But and this time I picked Get the Gringo, a movie that came out last year starring Mel Gibson. He plays this character whom you never find out his real name, and he's credited as Driver. And he pulls off this heist where he steals like a certain amount of money, quite a bit of money, and it goes wrong, and his car ends up crashing through the fence into Mexico, and he gets basically these corrupt cops find him. They take the money for themselves, and then they dump him in this prison in Mexico called El Pueblito, which I looked up, and apparently it's a real place. And it's all about him trying to survive in this, like figure out how this prison works, figure out who's what and what's what, and then get back what's his. And he also forms a bit of a bond with this single mother and her kid who are in there and who are significant to the criminal who's running the prison. And the movie is, I have to say, I didn't know quite what to expect going into this. Like I knew it was Mel Gibson gets dumped in a Mexican prison, and I didn't know is this gonna be like Mel Gibson doing like Locked Up Abroad the movie, or is it gonna be an action movie or what? And I was pleasantly surprised by what this turned out to be. It turned out to be like almost sort of like an action comedy, like classic Mel Gibson sort of material. Although it's not really an action movie in a lot of ways, it's much more of a crime movie. And part of what made this movie so kind of interesting to me is the fact that it's a prison movie, but it's unlike any other prison movie that I've seen. Like the prison that he gets put in is unlike any prison I've ever seen in the movie. Like there's no cells. I don't even think there's very little like indoor space. Like it's more like an open air market than it is like a prison. And it works completely differently, and there's very few of the usual sort of like prison movie tropes in here. Like there are some, but it's very different. Like the criminals are running the place, but it's not like they're running it from their cells. Like they have like the guy who's running it named Javi. He has like this like almost sort of like a penthouse to himself. He's got like his own medical facility up there and everything. I'm like, this is really interesting, and it was interesting watching Mel Gibson trying to adapt to this environment because it's not like watching someone adapt to like a regular movie person. It's a very different environment. And other things that I like Mel Gibson's great in this movie. Like he's as good as he ever has been in this, and he is pretty badass. Um, and it's just really cool watching him like in this situation. Like he figures out pretty early on that he needs to get some money, so he rather about as subtly as you can, he manages to burn down a taco shack and then sneak into like this little like medical dispensary, steal some drugs, sell them, and then sell them. It's like it's interesting watching that. And it's interesting seeing him like just walk around and see all the different stuff that's in this prison, and I like that. And when there is action, it's actually pretty badass and well shot. I I can't think of an action scene I didn't like. I mean, I like the bad guys. They weren't like incredibly great. They're just basically just like somewhat more upper class Mexican criminals. And the guy who's like in charge is like I kept thinking throughout the entire movie that like I kept thinking it's like man, it's like they found a Mexican version of Peter Stormare. And then later on in the movie, Peter Stormare actually shows up as like he's like basically the guy. I think he's the guy that Mel Gibson robbed at the beginning. Like that's not a spoiler really, but it's like, oh wait, there's like a Mexican version of Peter Stormare and the actual Peter Stormare in the same movie. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And there are some pretty cool sort of moments in it. like, I don't really want to spoil many of them, but there's one scene in particular that's like the shootout scene. It's bloody as hell, and it's just really exciting. And there's a lot of really exciting and satisfying moments in this. It's funny as hell, I might add. Like Mel Gibson just has like a knack for comedy. But what makes it even funnier is that every now and then Mel Gibson has like a narration. Like at the beginning of the movie when he's getting chased down by cops in his car, he's wearing him and the guy who's the other guy who helped him with the heist. They're wearing clown masks, and the other guy's like bleeding to death. He was like, and the narration chimes in, and he's like, "No one likes a sad clown, especially when he's coughing up blood all over the money you just stole." And then he's like, and then he goes on for a little while longer. He says something like, "Well, I guess that I guess that summer in Mexico that I plan on spending all this money isn't going to happen. Or like my own mom said, fuck off." I forget exactly what he said. It was something like that. And he has multiple moments like that throughout the movie. Like when before he gets released into like the regular prison, he's stuck for a few days in this holding cell, like crammed in with a bunch of guys, and they're playing constant mariachi music over the radio, and he can't stand it, and he's like plugging his ears with cigarettes. And then like in his narration, he's like, "This shit's been playing for 6 straight hours. Torture by mariachi." And there's a lot of funny moments in this. There's a part where he does a Clint Eastwood impression, which is pretty good. And he has like this interactions with this kid where like this kid is like he listens, he's like walking around and listening. And, like he sees everything basically, so he gives the kid a cigarette, and then the mom finds out about it, and later on she like slaps him. And then the next day the kid's like, it's like, "Give me a smoke." He's like, "Nah, I don't want your mom hitting me again." And later on, and even later on in the movie, he gives the kid nicotine gum. Like, and I will say I won't spoil anything, but I will say this: I found the ending to be incredibly satisfying. I will say that, and overall, the movie, I looked it up, and apparently the original title for this was going to be "How I Spent My Summer Vacation," which yeah, it sounds like kind of a dumb kids movie, but I don't know. I kind of prefer that title to Get the Gringo. I mean, Get the Gringo is just kind of like yeah, that tells you that it's in Mexico, but I just found that title, the other title, just to be way more amusing. Like if I saw a movie poster with like Mel Gibson on it, firing a gun, holding a gun, and it said "How I Spent My Summer Vacation," I'm like, I'd be interested. That sounds kind of interesting. Like Get the Gringo just sounds kind of meh to me. And those overall, I found this to be a very entertaining, very enjoyable film, and good enjoyable, not like bad enjoyable like Scorpion King 3. This was I found this to be a genuinely good movie. And I think it's kind of a shame that it didn't get more of a theatrical release here. It deserved a wider release, I think. But yeah, if you enjoy like old Mel Gibson kind of movies like Lethal Weapon and stuff, if you just like seeing Mel Gibson do his thing, and you want to see a movie that feels fairly unique, I definitely recommend this.